So Beyond Light wasn't a terrible expansion, but it certainly underdelivered in terms of the amount of content, and it really didn't shake things up enough like we might have hoped for with it being a new era of Destiny and all. But like the previous year, we had 3 more seasons to look forward to, and hopefully they could bring a bit more to the table than Season of the Hunt. First up was Season of the Chosen, another season focused on the Cabal. However, actually a lot more interesting this time than previous Cabal themed releases. Empress Keitel, daughter of Emperor Callus, proposed an alliance with the Vanguard to defeat the Hive. Keitel wanted us to kneel to her and treat her as our new leader though, and we just weren't having any of that. So we would need to fight various Cabal champions in a trial by combat kind of scenario, and it was a pretty great story setup that was much more involved than a lot of seasons previous, and would kick off this era of seasons having a bit more compelling stories. This would also be the beginning of the seasonal content being available in a new social space, the Helm. It was separate from the tower and you were in first person view, but it was a pretty cool addition to the game. Instead of just jamming more NPCs in the tower, we finally get to go somewhere else to interact with the new content, which is pretty similar to what Destiny 1 did with the Iron Temple and Reef social spaces. The new gameplay loop for Chosen was much better than Hunt, and actually better than most seasons that had come before. Things like the Umbral engrams were back, mixed with improved versions of things like the lure from Hunt. And the new activity Battlegrounds was a great addition. There were 2 of these strike-esque missions at launch, and 2 more added in the next few weeks. And Battlegrounds were highly replayable for the loot, and it of course helped that they were actually pretty fun. 3 strikes were added for the season on top of the Battlegrounds missions. 1 brand new one called Proving Grounds, and 2 strikes from Destiny 1, the Devil's Lair and the Fallen Saber strikes, which were fan favorites of course. While they weren't new strikes for some of us, it really didn't hurt to see them return. Anything at this point to help the strike playlist out is a positive, and 3 strikes added during the season felt so good. Trials of Osiris and Iron Banner even got some new items. Iron Banner saw a few Year 1 weapons return but with updated perk sets, and a new perk called Iron Reach, and we saw the return of the Iron Truage set. Trials of Osiris saw brand new armor sets and a few new weapons, and finally some vanity items to chase inside the playlist, including a Ghost Shell, Sparrow, and Ship. 2 exotic weapons were added during Chosen. Tiku's Divination, the Battle Pass weapon, and Dead Man's Tale, which had an incredible exotic quest mission called Presage. It was a very puzzle-focused, secret mission style questline that was even better than Harbinger from Season of the Hunt. It was unique the whole way through, with a good final boss, and a pretty interesting reveal at the end. 3 exotic armor pieces were added: Mantle of Battle Harmony for the Warlock, Omnioculus for the Hunter, and Cuirass of the Falling Star for the Titan. Salvager's Salvo was this season's ritual weapon, and it was really good. Basically the loaded question of grenade launchers. Chain reaction paired with Ambitious Assassin just makes it tons of fun to use, and viable in almost any activity, especially Grandmaster Nightfalls. Guardian Games made a return towards the end of the Season of the Chosen, with some changes made to encourage more camaraderie between players within your same class. Heir Apparent got a catalyst, there was a celebration ceremony at the end, but for the most part it was mostly the same as last year. Chosen was a pretty good content-rich season. The story was interesting, Battlegrounds were fun and rewarding, Presage was fantastic, the additions to existing content, whether that be Trials or the Strike playlist, helped the game feel like it received a real update, and like the game was growing again. It was by no means a perfect season, but it felt pretty good, especially coming off of Beyond Light and Season of the Hunt. And one of the most important quality of life improvements would also be made during this season. Sunsetting was now going away. The long debated and divisive issue finally saw its removal just 3 months after it was implemented. I think Bungie probably figured it was for the best at this point because they'd already gotten what they wanted out of it. Sunsetting things like the Mountaintop, Recluse, and various other ritual weapons was likely the main goal, and now that they were gone, there wasn't much of a reason to keep it around after ridding the game of the more problematic weapons. Shortly after Guardian Games came to an end, we'd be gearing up for the next season, Season of the Splicer. Before we get to the actual content of the season, we do need to first talk about a pretty unfortunate bug that prevented players from even playing the new season. Upon launch, there were tons of honeydew errors for the first few hours Splicer was live. Those were then fixed, but some players were constantly still crashing when trying to load up the game. And the reason for this was surprising. Too many friends on your friends list. If you had over 40 people playing Destiny on your friends list at the same time, then your game would crash. and this wouldn't be fixed for a few days, preventing quite a lot of players from playing the new season. It was a very odd bug that took far too long to get resolved. The story setup this time around was again pretty strong. Mithrax and the Vanguard make an alliance and work together to stop a Vex simulation from taking over the last city. So far, the simulation has enacted an endless night where the sun vanished from the sky over the last city. It was a pretty awesome premise with lots of important characters interacting together, including faction characters. As for the gameplay loop and seasonal content, it plays a lot like Season of Arrivals in both the activity itself and how you upgrade the new mechanism. Override was a bit more fleshed out and frankly better than Season of Arrivals activity. It had you doing a bit more, with things like entering the Vex portals and a real final boss fight that happens, and the Prophecy dungeon style theme and art style of the season was just a nice touch. The expunged seasonal missions were pretty cool, even if just for the exploration aspect rather than the gameplay. The missions looked great, there were some fun jumping puzzles and unique mechanics to work through, and the occasional good boss fight that made Tuesday resets exciting. And with a pretty great finale in terms of the bosses and story, the seasonal mission content was once again pretty high up there. 2 exotic weapons were added in Splicer, the first being Cryosthesia, which was a stasis sidearm that just didn't hit the mark. It had an interesting exotic perk, but the weapon itself just kinda sucked. And the second was the Vex Mythoclast, which was obtained in Vault of Glass. Yes, the Vault of Glass made a return, which we'll talk about in a minute. Again, another 3 exotic armor pieces were added, all boots this time. Star Eater scales for the Hunters, Path of the Burning Steps for the Titans, and Boots of the Assembler for Warlocks. This season's ritual weapon was Null Composure, basically a void version of the Loaded Question from Season 5, but this one was a high rate of fire archetype. Now fusions weren't in a great place in the sandbox during Season of the Splicer, so it wasn't hyped up all that much, but it would soon become a pretty dominant weapon. There was a lot more loot to chase in the world, with Bungie bringing back some more Year 1 weapons from factions and some more stuff from Iron Banner, as well as a few new ones. The Season of the Splicer weapons were alright, not the best, but they were still fun to chase good rolls for. The Dreaming City and Moon weapons were reissued as well, and this was likely done in response to the lack of weapons to chase after Sunsetting was introduced with Beyond Light, and so far the loot chase was getting there again, but there was still a long way to go. So the Vault of Glass returned from Destiny 1 with some updated mechanics and changes made that fit the nature of D2 a bit more, and it was nice to have it back. Even though it was a returning raid, having another raid to run just 6 months after Deepstone Crypt definitely helped satiate the player base's thirst for raid content, because 1 raid per year is pretty rough like we had during Shadowkeep, especially when Forsaken's year gave us 3 raids. One change that was made when Vault of Glass returned wasn't received too well though, and that was that the Deepstone Crypt lost its pinnacle status for loot drops. And it's a bit confusing why this was done. There really isn't much harm in having at least 2 raids provide pinnacle drops, especially when all other pinnacle drops just come from core activities which still lacked new content. So this change really just shouldn't have been made. And for as much good as Season of the Splicer had, there was quite a few more controversial things that came along with it. Transmog was added to the game, finally. The long-awaited feature found in so many other MMO games, allowing players to change their appearance to match whichever armor piece they wanted. But the problem here in Destiny 2 was with how unbelievably grindy it was. The currency you had to grind out just to be able to purchase a bounty from Ada took far too many hours. Then you had to grind that bounty out, and once completed would give you the currency to use on armor pieces to unlock for Transmog. And not only that, but you were capped on how many you could earn per season. Bungie finally brought us Transmog, but they did it in the most tedious, grindy, and convoluted way just to encourage players to skip the grind and purchase the materials directly from Eververse. It was pretty bad, and it was unfortunate. Things like this really further the narrative that Bungie only brings highly requested features if they can monetize it to death and milk the player base. And Bungie proved that theory right here with Transmog. It was pretty disgusting. And due to the backlash received around Transmog, Bungie announced that with an update in the next season, the grind would be significantly reduced by no longer requiring this extra currency to purchase the bounties from Ada, which would definitely tone down the grind by quite a few hours. But at release, this was pretty scummy from Bungie. The core activities being neglected continued to sour the experience for the season though. The content Splicer brought was good, but it really only made Tuesday resets the exciting days for the season, because the core game still suffered. Chosen at least helped the Strike playlist a bit by bringing a fair amount of Strike content, but Crucible and Gambit were still in shambles. and it didn't help when leveling still required you to interact with the core activities so often. However, some of the power level grind was reduced thankfully this season by only increasing 10 levels instead of 50, and as good of a change as that was, all it really did was highlight the fact that Tuesdays were all that mattered, and the rest of the game just wasn't worth playing much. The final event to take place during Splicer was Solstice of Heroes, which, besides a new shotgun and some minor changes to progression, was the same as it's always been. Shortly after Solstice would come the final season of the year, Season of the Lost. Now there were essentially 2 seasonal content drops that took place during Lost, but first we're going to speak strictly about Lost, then discuss the other content. The story of Lost would be what ushers in the story of the Witch Queen expansion, but it still was connected to what's been happening over the last few seasons, which was nice. We were tasked with saving the Lost Techians from an Ascendant realm as Morasov prepares for an exorcism of a worm from Savathun. Astral Alignment was the 6-player match-made activity, and it was fine, nothing terribly unique, but as for seasonal content, it was serviceable. But the formula was getting to be pretty tiresome at this point. These seasonal activities were fun little distractions momentarily, but they aren't designed to last. They go away at the end of the year, and when content isn't built to last, they usually aren't going to be top tier or have much depth to them, and players hoped that Witch Queen seasons would shake up this seasonal formula a bit more. Shattered Realm missions were the weekly story drops that gave us some interesting exploration moments and various collectibles, and the area grew each week in size the more we unlocked perks that allowed us to venture deeper into those areas. It was definitely interesting, but not too exciting gameplay wise. What was nice was to see a more streamlined way of obtaining weapons and armor for the season. We still had the upgrade grid system mechanic to work with, but not for the weapons. We no longer needed different items or materials to get loot drops, you just got them after activity completion, which was pretty cool. Unfortunately, the loot itself for this season was pretty forgettable, especially the weapons. Not too many of them actually stood out at all, except for some of the exotics. 2 exotic weapons were added this season. The now infamous Lorentz driver was the battle pass weapon and initially was a breath of fresh air to the class of weaponry that didn't see a whole lot of use for most of the year, linear fusions. Paired with some artifact mods, it made this weapon pretty popular during Season of the Lost. The second exotic weapon was Aeger's Scepter, which had its own quest to obtain. The quest was also fine, a lot of collect things and kill things, but the final mission was alright, if just a little bit easy, and the weapon was pretty decent and brought the total number of stasis exotics up to 3. The 3 exotic armor pieces were all from Destiny 1 this time around, Radiant Dance Machines for the Hunter, no backup plans for the Titans, and nothing manacles for Warlock. The ritual weapon Ascendancy was pretty good after the buff to Explosive Light. Both the Hothead Nightfall weapon and the Ascendancy reigned supreme for most of the season as far as legendary heavies go, but Season of the Lost mostly benefited from numerous quality of life improvements made to the game. For one thing, crossplay was finally here, a fantastic addition that allowed more friends to group up and play. LFGing felt better because everyone was a potential option to invite regardless of the system they played on. PvP, however, may have gotten a bit tougher thanks to PC players having a bit of an edge. However, aim assist is so strong on controller that it probably wasn't as noticeable as some other games that have crossplay. Primary ammo was now infinite. Just a great change all around. Running out of primary always felt dumb in the first place, so this was a great change. Changes made to cooldowns in both ability and super energy depending on the option you pick. It helped to balance out just enough while not feeling too impactful. Trials of Osiris got quite the revamp that rewarded players for their time spent in the mode a bit more, making it still worth playing even if you didn't get the flawless. Changes made to special ammo so it didn't transfer round to round. Matchmaking was added alongside solo freelance. Changes were made to prevent emoting and sword peeking. Trials was no longer free to play and would require players to own the most current annual expansion in order to access, and this helped prevent cheaters from just creating new accounts endlessly. And on top of all that, Bungie would come down pretty hard on cheaters, account recoveries, and win traders, and all of these things made Trials a better place overall. But the Witch Queen expansion received a delay, meaning Season of the Lost would go on for 6 months rather than the originally planned 3. And likely this delay was planned to accommodate the next release that would happen inside Season of the Lost, the 30th Anniversary Pack. This content drop brought along some free content as well as some paid content, so let's first talk about the free stuff. Dares of Eternity, possibly the best 6-player match-made activity in Destiny that changed every time you played through it, whether it was the next enemy type you needed to fight or the next area you would be fighting in, and which boss you'd be facing. It was pretty rewarding too, filled with great weapons themed around some of Bungie's old games like Halo and Marathon. Xur's Treasure Hoard also had some pretty cool additions in the way of armor and ornaments. The paid content included a new dungeon set in a loot cave that is definitely one of the best dungeons in the game. Great boss fights, the loot was also good, being mostly old Destiny 1 weapons and the new Thorn-inspired armor set. Ias Luna, Thousand Yard Stare, and most notably the Galahorn, which was something we never thought would return from Destiny 1. Other paid content mostly consisted of emotes, ships, sparrows, just vanity items really. And the content that came with the 30th anniversary pack was some of the best we'd seen in a while. Dares of Eternity was much better than any of the seasonal Horde mode content, and the Grasp of Avarice was a great dungeon. And with Dares of Eternity being free, was it worth $25 to get access to the dungeon, Galahorn, and a couple legendaries? That is completely subjective to who you are and what you value as a player, but I think it's safe to say that it's a little bit overpriced considering an expansion costs $40, and this anniversary pack had far less content than half an expansion. I honestly think it could have been just another $10 like a season, or maybe even $15, but $25? It's a bit steep to be honest, especially when players had already spent $70 or more on Beyond Light's year of content, which this wasn't included in. But I digress. 2 holiday events took place during Season of the Lost, both Festival of the Lost and the Dawning, and this year's festival brought along the replacement to the Haunted Forest of previous years. Haunted Sectors. Not nearly as fun or replayable as the Haunted Forest, but it did its job fine enough for the event, and the Dawning was about what we all expected. Just business as usual really. Beyond Light's seasons after the initial launch were pretty good. The storytelling was more of a focus and was done well. The seasonal content, while not amazing, felt much more consistently good than previous years and was also more rewarding. Some of the exotics that came this year were pretty great as well. The quality of life improvements were much needed and welcome changes, and overall these 3 seasons, as well as the 30th anniversary pack, made up for the lackluster Beyond Light and Season of the Hunt launch. But while these seasons were improvements over last year, there still was a gaping hole inside the core game. It was getting harder to ignore the lack of focus on core activities after multiple years of asking for new content for them. But players turned their focus to the upcoming Witch Queen expansion that would hopefully deliver in all the right ways at launch, and be followed up with seasons that were even better than Beyond Lights.